You mean, or for this reconsider what they did already?
Right. You know, I mean, I was just listening to it and I thought, well, where's the public? The landowner can appeal, but how about the traveler? How about me, who doesn't want to walk right and that's the roadway?
Yeah, yeah.
I can speak to that. A quick second on what the intent of that is.
If you could, please. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Started, so,
Yeah, what do we, it's 5:20. I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Yeah, you are recording. So this is the Non-Motorized Travel Advisory Council meeting for May 14th. In attendance, we have myself, Greg Worth, Lucas Wallace, Joel Ebert is excused. I did not hear from Kevin, so he shows up. Support staff, we have present David Kapke with the city, Lieutenant Jason Zander with the city, Sarah Sandow said that she may be late here, and then members of the public, we have Ann Houserath. So,
see anyone online?
No one online. Jason Zander is online, so
but no other attendance.
And no meeting minutes from April, so we'll move on to our agenda. So David, the floor is yours for city staff update.
So I'll address the question that was asked prior to the meeting being started about the code revisions to the sidewalks. So the code implies that boulevard sidewalks is the preferred method of installation. The intent of the changes is to streamline the process for whoever's asking for a variance, whether it's a single homeowner, a developer, or a commercial developer, what have you. Because going on to the commission agenda, there is lead time for each commission meeting, and it can get drawn out, especially if there's some time sensitive dates need to be met. So the part that it goes to the city manager, that was to try to streamline that process. But the intent is boulevard sidewalks,
right? And
the exception is the variance, and that's why there's just say that the intent is boulevard sidewalks. There's going to be some very, justification, or the rest of the neighborhood already has curbside sidewalk, or that side of the street already has curbside sidewalk. There's obviously going to be a case by case, and there are areas that the city recognizes that putting in boulevard sidewalks or even curbside sidewalks is still problematic because of a slope. So, those will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis.
Right.
I don't think it totally addresses what you were talking about, but that the intent is boulevard sidewalks so that we have that separation between the pedestrians and either the park or the traveling cars.
Right, which I really appreciate. What concerned me was that there was an appeal process for the landowner that did not appear to be an appeal process for members of the walking public. And I thought that was an oversight, one that I would like to see corrected. And I just wondered whether MTAC had discussed this, because I did not listen in on the meeting in April.
I can ask the city attorney. See about that.
Because my understanding is probably there's a process in the commission that any person who voted on the winning side, right, any member, and they all voted for it, could move to reconsider and just add that language.
So, David, does it come up then, manager approved this, and council approve it?
So what?
I mean, does it come up to a public meeting? Hey, the city manager approved this variance. So does anyone get it? Is there any notice at all that, hey, so, we did a variance here, that anyone could ever have input on
it? Other than bringing it up at this forum, there wouldn't be, because it's, again, the preferred method is boulevard, and there's only gonna be certain exceptions to allow curbside.
Well, I mean, we're not part of that statute of, hey, we'll run and MTAC and make sure that they, you know, I mean, there's no,
So we outlined that they get brought up to the manager to streamline the process.
yeah.
Right. So if I want, as a citizen, wanted to, I would just email the commission, ask for somebody to reconsider and then propose some language on this. Is that correct?
I'll
You do it that way here?
I'll have to double check with the attorney, but I'm assuming that if somebody brought up an issue, then the commission would hear it.
And for reconsideration, do they have to vote to reconsider at the next scheduled meeting?
So the vote to reconsider is actions that they have taken on themselves. I would have to ask the attorney what that looks like if the manager makes a decision. Can the commission?
No, I'm asking to reconsider the language of the,
Yes, then if you want to do that,
that's what I would send them and each of them an email then.
Yep.
Right, okay, thank you.
I'll get right back to this. Okay. So that was brought up, so I don't have to bring that up.
Thank you.
Ongoing projects, they're, you know, continuing with the ADA and the sidewalk program from last year, or from this year's budget cycle. It kicked off last year, last summer, and they're finishing now. We did receive that, and sorry, I don't have the exact amounts, but we did receive that SLIPA grant for some ADA work. And what was identified was between CR Anderson and Broadwater. We'll just have to see how far that money goes to see what other improvements can be made, but they are for just ADA ramps. And then the 6th Ward sidewalk or ADA ramp project is under review by MDT. We're hoping to hear back from them so that we can at least get that out to bid, and that's going to be the IDIQ, indefinite duration, indefinite quantity bid. So we're going to tell, basically, we have X amount of dollars, who can do the most ramps for that much money, instead of just saying we have 18 ramps and they know we have X amount of dollars, so they, you know, sometimes just do the math and you get really expensive ADA ramps that way. So right now the crews have just finished up the sweeping. Obviously there's still stuff out there because people's parked cars or wash down or what have you, or cleaning up the boulevards, and so they're keeping on this on the sweeping. We have some patchwork that's going on right now. We're working on RFQ to do the Centennial Trail 30% design between Benton and Joslyn. It won't include the bridge at this point because we're just getting that. All they want to see basically on the permit side now, instead of an easement, they want to see where the new trail is going to basically be aligned to, so that they can come back and say, yes, we'll be granting you a permit once you do 100% plans, or no. We're just getting to the point where they can say basically yes or no. You know, whether they're through that, the rest of the process, there would be comments by them, granted, but they needed 100% design. The city felt that we couldn't give 100% design because if we don't want to expend the money if we know it's going to be a no. So we came to agreement to do a 30% design, basically to show them what the trail will look like and where it will be in relation to either the southern right-of-way line or the center line of the tracks, or both. And then they'll review that and hopefully grant us the permit, and then we can move into the 100% design phase to get that done and then get the permit issued. So policy wise, there's not a lot. We're still working with MDT on all their little projects that they got going on. Bola Shepherd, they're still working with Jason Brothers, from my understanding. They brought a safety project to us that we weren't excited about.
Yeah, I got booted off too.
You're booted off?
That safety project was the intersection there, Cromwell Dixon and Washington, right there, basically the main entrance to Costco, across from Home Depot entrance. And their recommendation was a right in, right out. It said, and you can go to Costco and you can go to Home Depot and all those businesses and you can do that. The city's not going to support that. They would support a roundabout in that location or some other treatment, but not restricting the movements there. There's a football field of asphalt there that could be better utilized than just a right in and right out. So, and then also we have made the request for the signal at Harris and Cedar to be moved to Sanders and Cedar to accommodate all that traffic that's going to be coming up on Cedar from those apartments that are being built closer to Midco, but people will be using that corridor to transit back. So, sure, I'm missing something, but that's the highlights.
Are you open for questions?
Yep.
The SLIPA grant, is there a time frame on when those need to be, when it needs to be completed?
I believe it's next year. The biggest hurdle, they sent us some questions before we can proceed, but I have to clarify with this Department of Commerce, because most, if not all, the questions they asked us will depend upon when we what the bids come back, schedule, cost and all that stuff. So I'm contacting them tomorrow to try to see, do they need Hubble telescope view of the schedule that yes, we will be able to complete this by this date, or do they want a start date here to end date here? We won't be able to tell them until we get it bid. So, I mean, we can put it in the bidding documents, but as anybody that bid, sometimes that's detrimental to the number of bidders that you can, bidders more flexible. We'll contact them tomorrow and see what they're.
The 30% design on Centennial Trail, will there be a public process with that?
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, they've already outlined where we can be, so there's not really, we don't really have a lot of latitude on where to place the trail. So that's why I was kind of interested why we needed to go to 30% or 100% design when they already knew that we were only going to be in in this strip.
Yeah.
So,
I guess my thought on that is, I understand that there's maybe only two options of where to put the trail. And the railroad may dictate that, but, you know, there's just, from my, involvement in the community, lots of people ask about it, so it's more about actually showing progress, and people want to be involved, so that would be my thought there, and.
yeah, so the railroad kind of, at least the last time we met, we walked the site with them, the old abandoned railroad bed that's there. The trail will start a bend and be placed upon that. And then as that gets closer to the southern right-of-way boundary, then the trail will be basically within the first 30 to 50 feet, depending on the topography, all the way down through Barney. And then as you get closer to Henderson, the right-of-way area narrows because of the stormwater ponds and some other things. And then we get to the crossing, and then basically we follow the existing trail up to where it ties in with the paved. And yeah, we can have some public outreach on that, but that's kind of the that's where the trail is going to be. It will be fenced on the north side of the trail from Benton all the way down. That was part of their stipulation. But there will be, between 30 and 50 feet for a 10-foot wide trail. There'll be room for, amenities, exercise, stations, whatever. We're not at that level of design, but I think there's room for some things like that, except for where it narrows down there by the.
There should be a plaque about when the train exploded in the 1980s at that crossing.
Yeah, pieces of parts of it.
That's a good idea.
What about the special plants? Can we do it and protect those plants? You recall that being?
I'm sure that there'll be a survey. But this whole permit process from BNSF is something different than what they typically have us do. We usually do easements. This permit process is a little different, so
Maybe they don't want a reminder about the train blowing up.
I don't think that was 100%.
We can do that after the fact.
It was the Montana Railway. Yeah. They're not their fault at all. Shouldn't have brought that up until we get this permit.
And then good to hear about. So you requested removing that traffic signal. That's not programmed with MBT or anything at all, is it?
They're doing a study.
Hopefully their study comes up with a logical conclusion that it should be moved.
Unlike the signal Sanders, just south or south of that.
No, I mean I'd like to see some pedestrian crossing improvements there. That was one of my comments in the 6th Ward neighborhood plan. Is that was actually a very good north-south corridor.
I had a lot of pedestrian comments in that 6th Ward neighborhood plan. It seemed like the pedestrian and ADA kind of got, I don't want to say glossed over, but there wasn't a lot of detail, whereas there was a lot more detail in some areas. I probably don't have the exact same comments, but I think they'll get a theme that there's a little bit more work needs to be done.
Yeah, that you brought up, Cromwell, Dixon Lane, and Washington Street, Custer Avenue, Montana Avenue. I've just given up on those on any type of pedestrian facilities. Are just awful, but luckily I'm in a position where I can make those decisions. I'd like to make those decisions. But
well, I will say that working with MDT has been, I would say they're more open now than they have been in the past for the discussion. ask the discussion. You know, they haven't implemented anything yet, so I'm hopeful that we can continue the path that we're going down now, that, you know, as we work with them, they work with us, we can, you know, see some of those city features versus MBT features.
So, yeah, the tide is changing at MBT, and they want to accommodate local control as much as possible. So they want City Hall to be making decisions on how the city wants to have their infrastructure.
Dave, could you just kind of repeat what you said about moving the signal for the apartments by Winco? I just didn't quite.
So right now it's at Harris and Cedar, by the old Kmart and post office.
Oh, on Cedar. Okay,
Yeah.
I was thinking Custer.
On Cedar, and we want to move it from Harris up to Sanders to help meter that traffic that we know is coming from.
Because then people are going to be turning left down Sanders or going
Right.
over to the interstate.
Yeah.
Down Cedar from Sanders.
And we'd prefer not to have the increased traffic going through that little bit of that residential neighborhood there. Because there's 130, I think, some units up with those luxury apartments that are being built now, and then 300 and some odd units on the property just south of those luxury apartments that are going up. So there'll be quite a few more cars out there.
So can I ask a question off topic maybe? I just was curious if you could maybe talk a little bit more about the signals that we have at pedestrian leading intervals, whether it's possible to do that on any of them. Do we have that on anything?
So we put the request in on 11th and Rodney for Greg's. 11th is NDT, so we do have to ask them. And I haven't heard back on that. Most of the signal boxes should have the ability. I'm not going to say 100% because there are some older boxes out there that may not have the controllers that have the options, but I could be wrong. So yeah.
So if you push the button, the ones that have at least a button probably do have that ability. And
So the button is only typically for basically for you to tell that it's pedestrians are waiting.
Yeah.
A lot of the signals right now are purely on cycle.
They don't
So
have a button.
you can press that button 10 times and it's going to go through its cycle. It's not going to preempt. So
Yeah.
some signals, there's a pedestrian preemption. So if people are waiting and it gets put in now, you know, so it just really depends on how the signals are set up.
Well, and that's kind of what I was just kind of curious about generally. I've noticed that the one on Benton and 11th doesn't, if no one's there, if no cars are there, don't push the button, it doesn't go on that cycle. It just like it knows if cars are waiting or people are waiting.
Well, that's usually because they either have loops or they have video detection.
Yeah, so it's like detecting it.
So a lot of the state signals you'll see will have video detection. So if there isn't vehicles waiting on the cross street, they won't cycle through that cross traffic. Now, like Custer is on a set just because they have to keep those synchronized, or else it deteriorates pretty fast. So.
Okay. Anything else for David? And I know there's a public on the end of the agenda, but you can just chime in where you feel
Right.
appropriate.
Thank you.
So, we'll move on. Sarah is not here, so is Jason Zander? Are you still?
Yeah, he's
on? The floor is yours, Jason.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So first off, apologize for not making it last month. I ended up sick on that day and didn't even think about getting somebody to replace me, so I do apologize for that. But I did go over some of our crash information from since the last meeting. During that time, we had 120 non-injury crashes. 49 of those were either on private property or non-reportable. I would say a large percentage of those is private property. We did have 3 rollovers. No major injuries out of those that I'm aware of. We did have 10 injury crashes. 6 of those were vehicle versus vehicle. So we did have 4 involving pedestrians. One of those was an ATV, like a 4-wheeler, drove up onto a sidewalk and struck a pedestrian. The driver took off and was never located. The second one was a vehicle versus a bicycle on a sidewalk. I don't know why I didn't put a lot of information on that one. I'm not exactly sure where that one was at. The driver was cited for failed to yield to a pedestrian on the sidewalk. The third one was a vehicle versus bicyclist. On that one, the vehicle was westbound on Cedar, and the bicycle was southbound on Sanders, and the bicycle failed to yield, blew right through the stop sign and collided into the vehicle. The bicycle did. And the bicyclist, I don't think she's been cited yet, but she will be cited for fail to yield from a stop sign. And the final one was a vehicle versus bicycle. Vehicle was southbound on Ewing, and this was a kid on a bicycle, was on the sidewalk, and the vehicle inched forward to look a little bit further, and it was a very slow speed impact with the bike, and the child was not injured, but the vehicle driver was cited for fail to yield to a pedestrian on the sidewalk.
What was that cross street, Jason?
Oh, I
You can
did
just-
not write that one down. It was on Ewing. And the first one, I didn't write down locations at all for some reason.
Okay.
I did this in between about 10 other things I had going on today, so I apologize for that. I can certainly get you locations on those if you'd like.
I just was, yeah, because if vehicles are having a hard time seeing around, then there might be a sight triangle issue that we need to address, or parked vehicles or whatever.
Certainly, yeah. Let me see if I can get that one figured out, and I'll let you know, Dave.
Any other questions for Lieutenant Zander?
Greg, I got one.
Okay.
Yeah. Jason, was there a pedestrian or bicycle crash on Benton at the Centennial Trail yesterday morning?
Not that I am aware of.
Okay.
Um,
I came out there was cyclists, some pedestrians, and an ambulance, and I was just cycling through, so I was curious.
Yeah, I didn't have a report of anything like that, and I looked all the way up through today. So
Super.
I would say that there was not a crash involving the vehicle.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Moving on, Dave, could you get an update on the MPO?
Yep. You just get the. It will be tomorrow's the 15th. So I believe it's the 29th We'll bring the next steps to the commission, which will include the agreements. There's Sarah. And then the meeting after that, I think it's June 3rd, will be their consideration for approving the mayor to sign those agreements. So, yeah, the 29th and 3rd. So, as far as that is, we have to get the agreement signed, and then we have to do a UPWP, which is Unified Work Plan. And like I said before, that's going to basically be our public participation plan that's required by the MPO, the action plan, and then the LRTP, which will, if anybody has gone through the current LRTP, the new one will have additional sections that are required by the MPO. Or if you're an MPO, there's required sections that have to be in there. We already kind of took a stab at a few of those last time around. I think it's like, I can't remember the name of the chapter, but it's basically having to do with the freight and a couple other chapters that we already kind of laid the groundwork for, so we didn't have to do as much updating with this next plan. So moving, we hired the MPO manager. We had, I don't remember exactly how many candidates we had, 4 or 5. A couple of them dropped out before the interviews. One dropped out because they took another position before we interviewed, so that left 2. And then the one candidate, after we interviewed, they dropped out. We brought it to the committee, and they felt that even after the 2 interviews, that they felt that the last candidate they were comfortable with, so they elected to move forward with that, and that was Ty Weingartner, current city employee doing the project management for the ERP, and he will take us through the next steps of the MPO. So once he'll be on board like around the 30th of May. Hopefully by then we'll have soon after that we'll get the agreement signed, and then get the UPWP done, and then the joint TTAC TPC meeting is on the I'll have to get back. I can't remember the date that. So the joint, they're going to have a joint meeting because basically they're going to bring all the members together of the 2 committees, give them an overview of what the MPO does, why we're MPO, kind of the whole background, and then talk about steps moving forward. The initial steps of the PCC, which is made up of the mayor of Helena, the mayor of East Helena, the chairman of this county commission, the TTAC chair, and then MDT representative. They'll have to adopt bylaws, both the TPCC and the TTAC. So, and then we'll, once we get through that joint meeting, then we'll be able to have some scheduled meetings. The plan is to probably do monthly meetings, bi-monthly meetings in the beginning until everybody has their feet on the ground moving forward. And the first big things on the agenda are the public participation action plan and the LRTP. Those RFQs out, so we can start working.
So Ty Weingartner is the new MPO
manager.
And they're so I guess the city houses that employee, but they're not a city employee. Is that correct?
They fall under city, healthcare, and we pay them, and then we have to front the costs, and then we get reimbursed from the PL funds on them. More than likely like a quarterly basis, so the city fronts the money for that position. And then moving forward, depending on what plans, the city, county, East Helena will be fronting the money for the plans, and then they'll get reimbursed through the reimbursement process with the PL funds or whatever funds.
Yeah, I was curious, like how that tie is going to be structured. Because it's not necessarily solely a city function. So exactly. So how does that, in the personnel flow chart, is that like its own division department, or how does that work?
Essentially, I mean, because somebody has to sign the time cards and all that stuff, that falls under the transportation systems department. So I get what you're saying. It's a little funky. It's not kind of a standalone because they don't get their direct allocation of funds to where they manage it themselves. The funds get managed by the PCC. TAC gives them any details or requested information to make their decisions. So the PCC is where the decisions will be made on how the PL funds, the planning funds that we get for the MPO will get allocated. And then the MPO manager will just basically facilitate what the wishes of the PCC are, or whatever other requirements we have that are required reporting.
So that's what I was kind of getting at. Essentially, you're the direct report. Are you going to be the direct report?
Yes. I mean, the direct report is signing their stuff. I won't be direct. Their direction comes from PCC and the TAC.
So, sorry to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, that's what I was curious, is to, how to kind of break that bond, where this person, Ty, can have the autonomy, and
So can I ask, I guess, so all these agreements are going to the commission tomorrow, and I assume likewise to the
tomorrow for discussion, and let them know what the next steps are.
And then they'll decide at the next meeting about signing them.
Yes.
And I assume that's going on with the county and East Helena.
Yes.
They're kind of going through it too. So, and without reading it, I guess, what is in here? Like, is it that, that we, I mean, is there something that we,
I mean, to boil it down, the 3 C's, it just says that we'll follow the 3 C's as stated goals, and to bring them up to tell you exactly what the 3 C's are. But there's a performance agreement that basically says that we'll execute. There's the PL funding that basically says how we plan to spend the money, and in that agreement it's project by project. Some MPOs designate 40, 20, whatever percentages, but since there's a vast array of different projects that could be out there could be a project that's solely in East Helena or solely in the county. We didn't feel that we wanted to strap one of the other entities with a portion of the funding when it's really their best interest. So we did that purposely so that every project that comes up, the PCC and the TAC will get together and decide what those percentages will be. And then they'll basically be in agreements, move forward for those. The interlocal basically just says that the city of Helena, Lewis Clark County, and the city of East Helena and MDT agreed to work together to implement the requirements of the MPO. And in there, and in a few of those agreements, it does line out the makeup of the membership of the PCC.
Well, that's where I just was getting to that.
Okay.
So the
Oh, go ahead.
T-TAC, did we end up getting a non-motorized?
Yep.
We got a
Yes.
non-motorized person on there.
Voting member, yes.
And then non-voting members. So then does it line out how that's gonna get selected, or?
That'll be put out just similar to how the boards are now. The PCCs, obviously, those are elected officials. The TAC, there are some, staff folks on there. There's other designated people. And if there's any at large, then they'll go through the similar process to what the boards do now. There'll be a public call put out most likely by the city clerk, since we're kind of housing and assisting the process. And then once they get applications, those will go to the PCC for consideration.
Looks like that's the only at-large position.
I believe so.
Greg, I have a question for David. Is it standard in the other cities, the other MPOs in Montana, that the entity is housed in a city rather than creating a separate entity?
Yes. Great Falls is their managers housed in their planning. Missoula's is housed, I think, in their engineering for their. But yeah, it's housed typically within one of the entities that is part of the MPO.
And financially, do you expect that Helena will come out at least revenue neutral on this? That because I was reading, I didn't read the whole thing, but reading through this, and it looks like there's a lot of responsibility on the city of Helena.
So when there's a certain amount of money that's allocated for MPOs by state. Up until Bozeman and Helena became designated NPO, there's only been 3 in the state. And they've split that money equally. It's a federal requirement that if you reach this certain thresholds, you have to become an MPO. But there's no additional funding by the feds for the additional MPOs. So now instead of 3 pieces of the pie, now there's 5 pieces of the pie that have to that cut up that amount of funding. So everybody gets their chunk based on a formula that you'll have to ask MDT about, and then you can build those up. So those are your planning dollars. So if you want to be revenue neutral, you would stay within those planning dollars. But if you want to do above and beyond, then you would the entities would have to come up with the extra, basically. So if we wanted to house 4 MPO staff and do all these plans, there would have to be additional contributions paid for by the city, county, and city of East Helena, because the PL funds wouldn't cover that many staff and the plans themselves.
Does the MPO status allow the MPO to apply for federal funding that the cities were not eligible for before?
Not really. There's some funding levels that are, I want to say, set aside for MPOs, but there might be money carved off of a typical program that goes directly to the MPOs. You know, it doesn't preclude the MPO from doing grants and everything. Our biggest hangup right now with the city, the county, and everybody is a lot of these grants want either an A in action plan or B in LRTP to identify the projects. We have neither that the MDT would recognize as current. And then we tried to do the plan. We wanted to start the LRTP prior to this process, but we were told that we couldn't because anything done prior to the actual official designation wouldn't count. So we've been having to wait to get through this MPO process to get this started so that we can get those plans up and moving. So, you know, we're hopeful. You know, the first plan, part of the plan is going to be the public participation piece, which, you know, shouldn't take that long for a consultant to put together. And then the action plan opens up some grants that we have available that are available to the cities, the NPO or the county, and then concurrently working on the numbers.
Thank you. And I've been told that my application is on hold pending the MPO. Who's going to make that decision? Will there be a discussion? And the back hint on this is that they might not keep the MTAC going. And
well, there's a discussion on the 20. I gave you guys the wrong dates. Sorry. The MPO is the 15th, which is tomorrow, and then that following Monday, the 29th, and June 3rd, if June 3rd is needed. The 29th, the city commission is going to have a discussion on the MTAC and the MTAC resolution.
That's the 29th?
Yes.
Okay, and presumably members of the MTAC can be there, right?
Yeah, it's a public meeting.
Is that an admin meeting?
Yeah, the
29th. Yeah, so those are public meetings.
Is that also when they're going to be doing transportation budget that same day?
Yes. That admin meeting starts at 2. Goes till 6 or whatever time we get done, I guess.
And how does that work? Because I'm baffled by why anyone thinks that some sort of pedestrian bike advocacy for the city of Helena won't be needed just because there's an MPO.
So the non-motorized came out of a recommendation from the TCC. The TCC no longer exists, so it's reorganizing, revising the resolution to reformalize it, whether as a city entity or whatever. That's what the discussion is. It's just how to move those steps forward.
And could the MTAC, if you wanted to, put forth just a justification for why this is needed, or possibly even come up with 1 or 2 other scenarios that would be bike ped advocacy that are different from the way MTAC is now. And that's
Greg's, didn't you send something out of that a while ago?
Well, I think we had made a motion that just was simple that said we should continue to
Yes,
exist.
we have. I think it was almost like a year ago, and that's what we'll look at the agenda and see how the discussion is presented, and I can remind the commissioners that this is MTAC's position on it. I gave the commission my comments on the TAC. I thought there was a lack of citizen representation on that. The TAC could replace MTAC if they proceed to go that direction.
it could, except that's 30,000 feet, and Helena, they're never going to address.
So the TAC is so the NPO. While we do studies that are overarching, the authority for the TCC is on federally funded roadways. It expounds, but there's some language in there that Because when we first started in there, we're like, oh, well, the DCC is gonna be now making decisions for everybody. And MDT had to correct us. So, you know, county, East Helena, our maintenance stuff is not under the PCC, you know, jurisdiction. It's that local things can be local, whereas the PCC and their jurisdiction are more on the federal aided routes or federally aided projects.
So, you know, if staff is gonna have a recommendations for either changes or reorganizing or what the, I guess you're, you're probably the staff on it, maybe what's your take on what should be done with MTAC?
I think there's
Should
a
it be
couple options.
reorganized?
I think it can be reorganized. I think there's some opportunity to bring in some other representation, not to make it an MPO intact, but I mean, the county, we have a pretty, our interface with the county and the urban standard boundaries and everything like that. You know, some of the complete streets policy stop at the city limit lines, you know, for theater tech. And maybe if there was a larger group that was county or even maybe Helena representation, then maybe the valley could have a vision for how these pedestrian networks are going to be connected instead of each entity kind of doing their own thing.
Mhm.
So we're just going to give them the background of where and when MTAC was created and walk through that process. Basically, that's going to be more of a work session of them to answer questions or ask questions. And hopefully, we'll have answers. And if not, then we might have to reschedule for so that we can have another admin meeting to come back with the answers.
Now, at admin meetings, that's just information, that's just staff, our
Yeah,
members of the
no.
public, there's no public comment, is that
No,
correct?
there's public comment.
There's public
no
comment?
decisions are made at that.
So, well, and we've talked about this some, I guess, but and what do you see as value that, you know, something like MTAC reorganized, you know, how can it, you know, serve a purpose or add value? I mean, you know, I think we've discussed that some in like doing these walk audits, you know, early, you know, or, you know, with the timing that's right to where, you know, that input can be considered. You know, I guess I feel like there is value in, you know, getting volunteers or people who are interested in it to, you know, bring stuff to the city's attention or, you know, consider, discuss stuff, I guess, but
So, but I'll talk about the walkouts a little bit. I know Sarah had some stuff on the ones you put on the agenda. So when I went to put together this, you know, walk audit packet, so that there's more streamlined process that we can work together to choose the walk audits, go do the walk audits, formalize the information in there so that we have all the information that's needed, and then, you know, some type of recommendation or staff memo that comes up that follows that is on a consistent basis. There was more, I guess, more different walk audits out there that took it from a different lens. So I'm trying to incorporate all those different lenses. There's walk audits for people with disabilities. There's safe routes to school. There's walk audits, you know, for bikes and pets. There's all these different. So I'm trying to bring all those major things into this document. I think I got like 6 pages that is more of the walk audit assessment sheet, so that, you know, it kind of goes through questions that, like, let me just bring it up because I don't misstate, but it walks through the different, I mean, it starts off with a map, it starts off with the general location, who attended, just,
Sorry about that.
the weather, and then it talks about environment. And I took some of these from other walk audits so that there was a good mix, but you know, are the primary users, who are the primary users of the segment? Select all that apply, you know, bikes, peds, vehicles, transit, trucks, freight, other type of pedestrians using the route. Are they adult, elderly, so that we have that demographic? What are the nearby land uses? The pedestrian and cyclist infrastructure, is there a usable shoulder, yes or no? Are there sidewalks, yes or no? And then there's a bunch of follow-up questions after those. Are there shared use paths, yes or no? If there is a shared use path, is it properly maintained? If not, please describe. Pedestrian cyclist information, are there bike lanes, yes or no? You know, if yes, are they clearly marked, or too narrow, you know, properly maintained? Are they a conventional bike lane buffered or separated? Are there sharrows, along with a bunch of follow-up questions? Street crossings, intersections, are there too many driveways along the route? You know, the street names and route names, walking paths clearly labeled. That, you know, they go through, and then comfort and style. Are there shade, trees, awnings, other protective elements along this route? Are there benches? Are there lighting? Is there unleashed dogs? Human behavior. Are there no pedestrians in the area walking? Are there a lot of pedestrians? Are there no cyclists in the area? Are there children, you know, elderly? Traffic behavior, posted speed limits above 35. What is the posted speed limit? ADTs. What are those? Is there infrastructure? Narrow lanes, large street trees, speed bumps, tables, public parking lanes, medians. Drivers do not stop at stop sign. Drivers roll through the crosswalk. Drivers make unexpected turns that are not yielding to pedestrians. Drivers appear to be speeding or seem hostile. Crosswalks without signal. Are there crosswalks? And if there are, what are the features of that? And then additional comments. So I'm on page 10. I don't want to make this, you know, it's an encyclopedia, but I think there's certain information that you all want to capture, and then there's certain information that we want to capture so that we can make informed decisions. So once I get a little bit farther on this, I'll ship it to Greg, and he can send it out to everybody, and you guys can comment on it. So maybe that's the wrong way to go.
Is the idea to get some of this data into that computer system so that it can be?
It'd be just like if we do an intersection study, or if we do a speed study. We would identify like on a speed study, we'd identify the location that we set up, either the tubes or our armadillo or the and then we would input that information when it was, what information.
I think it's brilliant to link the walk audits to decisions that are going to be made. I mean, I really like that, because I couldn't figure out how the walk audits were being used. Regarding, again, the restructuring or existence of the MTAC, can you send, you've got a lot on your plate for that day, but can you send at least an outline of what you're going to tell the commission to the MTAC?
I don't have the memo written yet.
Well, of course not, but I mean, when you do, because part of the thing that I see that I'm struggling with here is how what goes on here relates to and connects with actual policy. And one of the ideas that I had is possibly the overarching, like you said, the regional, something associated with the MPO that's bike and ped oriented, but then a subcommittee specifically just for the city of Helena, which would then send a representative or some, because I think both are needed. And the reason I tell you this, I was on the policy committee for the MPO in Boise, and we still had a bicycle advocacy committee, and we had a pet advocacy committee. I mean, I was advocating left, right, and center to not very much effect on this large policy committee because it was quite large. But I think there's very much a need in the city of Helena for this kind of advocacy committee. And I think there's a need to connect it regionally better than it is now.
Well, I mean, I feel like there's a niche where, we can provide input that's useful for the transportation department in making decisions. It isn't necessarily, well, tell the city commission and they'll decide whether they care about that or not, but just info that the department can consider, input that the department can consider in making the decisions that they have to make on small stuff, day-to-day stuff. I don't know. I guess
ultimately, I think policy decisions are great for groups like this to inform policy decisions. I'm open to hearing, the recommendations for the, in the weeds type thing, but I guess my vision would be that it's a two-way street. Sometimes the recommendations are going to be implemented, and sometimes they're not. And that's just the way things work. And that, if there's a two-way street, then we can get stuff done. So,
yeah, well, yeah, I mean, obviously you don't always get what you want. And that's probably true of everyone and everyone who wants something.
But we keep asking.
I think I've shared my frustration, and I understand I'm not going to always get what I want, but I at least want to have the opportunity to give my voice, and I don't agree with not putting curb extensions on 6th Avenue. I wasn't allowed to provide my input in any formal mechanism for that, when we went through the stuff with Rodney Street, I would have liked to see curb extensions, sidewalk extensions, by the B&B. I made those comments, but the business owners didn't want them, so I can accept that, I had my voice, so I think, it's a two-way street, but that's part of the, as we get into the MPO, that's the public process.
Part of the value
voice.
is to get that everything heard, right?
Exactly, and have the visioning before you even put a plan together.
But also, I think that part of it is, you've got a bunch of volunteers and put them to work, that, maybe you can get some value out of, maybe the city can gain some value from having committees like this, not just, the value of, public participation generally, but helping accomplish something or, do something.
So that was the whole vision behind the visioning of the walk audits.
Yeah.
So that we could work together so that I can tell you where we're going to be, and then we could look at these areas to do walk audits so that they'd be meaningful and informative in the process. There's a lot of areas in town that I will say that short of just pure maintenance, there is need for enhanced features, but I can't always fill both needs. I can't do the maintenance that's required and do the enhancements. 6th and Davis is a good example because of all the work that needs to be done there. That's going to have to be a separate project because of the fund. So that's where I think that we can, make the best, most inroads into some of these areas. We might find that these walk audits that this corridor we're going to do our, basically our maintenance, and we're gonna put it in the CIP for all these other enhancements that need to be made, because they're not just, and I'm not just talking curb extension. I mean, I have a bigger vision for Helena Avenue, or smaller vision, I guess. Depending on how you wanna look at it. Because I think Helena Avenue could be one of those really cool, aesthetically pleasing corridors that not only accommodate vehicles, but also bikes and peds in a different way than it is now, with just basically a big runway. So that's kind of where that I'm looking at, just like Neil, looking at, road diet there. Those are bigger projects that we have to put in the CIP. We have to prioritize them. I think some of those where we're bumping the curve, basically all we're doing is, not all that we're doing, but in essence, adding some new curb line and boulevards, and some trees, and shortening narrowing the asphalt width. They're going to be expensive, and I don't think they're going to be millions and millions of dollars projects. I think they're going to be pretty efficient if we approach it the right way. And when it's done, I think that they're going to be a nice asset to the city and to the people that use those facilities. Because right now, I went by Farmers Market this weekend, and sure would have been great if there was a lot of angle parking there for the Farmers Market, but I don't think that is probably the best use for all that area that Neil has right there. It was designed to be a bypass back in the day of urban renewal. It's never happened, but we still have the remnants of it. So
yeah, and that's part of the discussion here is we are heading in the right direction. I'm optimistic that we'll have better engagement, and the transportation department looks at it from one perspective, but I, as a user, have a different perspective, and how we mesh all that together, and then ultimately the commission can decide what type of jewelry we want to put on a maintenance project. So
I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but I love both the Neil and the Helena Ave that you're talking about, and I think that precisely advocates for some sort of Helena bike and ped advocacy, because people in East Helena or out in the county don't really care about those particular. I think you've got a specific thing that's for us here, and we do all care about connectivity. So anyway, I think some sort of advocacy group should emerge out of this, and I've been frustrated that I've been attending these meetings since August, and I'm glad now finally the conversation is going to occur about whether the committee continues.
let's move on here, because we've spent a lot of time on this.
Thank you.
And it's a very good discussion here as well too. It's all meaningful, valuable. But is Sarah still on? We'll jump up and have Sarah give her report.
Yeah, hi everyone. Good to see everyone virtually. Thank you, David, for the update on the walk audit progress there. There are some really great resources out there. That is definitely what we started basing it off of. So I'm glad you're looking at all of those to get that organized. Let me know how I could help with that. And so I think my update is just once that's finalized, I think we should, as a committee, think about how we want to get trainers trained. So, in the past, and this was years ago, there was a big grant that was got that we were able to bring a trainer out here and train a bunch of trainers. I know we don't have the funds for that right now. So I think we could do it internally though. I think we can bring the right partners to the table and do a training with the new way that we do it. Again, whether it's just we have all of MTAC trained or mixed with city staff and public health staff and any interested people, however we want to do it. But I think that's a conversation that we should have as a committee about how we want to get trainers once that's all set. So I think it should be set because obviously we need to know what we're doing. So that's kind of my recommendation. And I do see the 3 walk audits under my name, but I do recommend, unless anyone wants to talk about it, that we wait for the new process.
Thanks, Sarah. And yeah, I think I've got these listed on here and they're not immediate, but if I don't have it on paper, I forget about them. So that's why.
Agreed. Same.
Sent an email to myself, Greg.
Yeah. But yeah, I'd like to look at, the form, I guess the walkout you put together, I'd like to see it. Yeah.
I'll try to finish that up in the next week or two,
Mhm.
so that you guys can take a look at it. So, like Sarah said, I'm looking at the AARP has a form, Safe Routes to School has a form, disabilities folks has a packet. Some are big, some are smaller. I don't want to make this a huge ordeal, but I do want to make sure that we're capturing the right, and some of it, like potential traffic counts, we can get what is on like MDT's traffic data. But if it's one of those areas that we need to count, we can look at, putting our mile vision cameras up and count the intersection that way, so that it's not being impacted by a big group of people out there. It's basically kind of normal flow, and then we can input some of that data in there, and then on the back end. So,
Yeah, and we can go through all that. Sounds techie. I think the very first question should be, do pedestrians feel welcome here? There's places that as a pedestrian you would just avoid, so that's where I think we come at with different perspectives. So we can fully vet how we want to capture the information from the walk audit.
there's actually one that I just was trying to find it, because it doesn't have the question you stated, but it's very similar.
Mark Fenton's asks it very similar to how Greg just mentioned it, and that's the one that we're mostly using. So maybe that's where you're looking, Dave.
Okay, any other questions for Sarah? We'll move on. Thanks, Sarah. Moving back on the MTAC resolution amendment. We don't have Joel's here, Kevin's not here, and we'll table that because potentially we'll follow the discussion with the MTAC discussion with the commission. So we'll just table that for now. The Rodney 11th, you touched on that. I can't remember if I sent a comment to MDT or not, but I have myself a note that I will. I did write a comment to MDT on that C.R. Anderson to Broadwater School route, the Euclid Cleveland right there. So where it goes, I don't know, but at least I've voiced my opinion on it. So Henderson Street Bridge, you touched that. So that will not be part of the 30% plans, but is there a way to get that Henderson Street Bridge?
So I've talked to the manager until we get the yes, no, he doesn't. We're not going to expend those funds to design a bridge until we get that preliminary yes or no from ESF. But that's what we're hoping to get with that 30% plan. So we're planning to get that RFQ out here shortly, within the next few weeks, and then hope to get a consultant on board to do that work. Obviously, they could, if they say yes, then that agreement could be expanded to finish from. Obviously, we don't want to change courses midstream, so that might be expanded to finish off that to 100% design plans. That's consulting.
Yeah, I just I know it's a very high priority project for Wilbur in the past. I've been going to baseball games, and you see people struggle up and down the big grades.
Don't forget that there's some money socked away somewhere to pay for it.
Yes.
No, that money will be carried over.
$10,000 or something that's
No,
being held by,
It's like 75.
yeah.
Yeah, there's money
So
for, actually, Commissioner Shirtliff got
Hopefully
the
that-
money for it. There is money from, actually, Pre-Prepared Land Trust still has the money
That's
from, Friends of Centennial Trail that's earmarked for the bridge, so. The RRFB installations we've been talking about, is there any further updates on schedules for those?
They're on order, and then once we actually get them on the schedule.
Okay.
But the flashing yellows, I talked to the school district, they were on board with us changing out those annoying flashing yellows to rectangular rapid flashing, so that they'll be pedestrian actuated instead of just the constant demolition of the flashing yellow light. So the first one that is on tap for that one is 11th morning. They're
Okay. The TA application, well, it's not due till the next spring, but I did see that there was a call out, noted to let people know that there will be a new TA cycle. Has the city thought about what projects, or can we get input on what projects we want?
So that's one of those conundrums, Greg. There's talk that there's money set aside for the MPOs. So but we haven't seen anything official that they're gonna carve off money for the MPOs, and the MPOs, whatever that amount is, can prioritize what projects get done with that money. So wouldn't be as competitive as a regular TA application, but again, they're gonna be $50,000, or we haven't got any details on that, but yes, we will have some projects that we will put forward, like crossing across Lindale, like we had before, that somehow the other one scored higher. But yeah, we'll obviously take input from this body if there is, and then we'll go to the commission to see which projects they want us to, depending on how many we have. If we can come up to agreement on one or two projects, we don't really have to go to the commission to say this is what we're gonna apply for. We spoke with MTAC and staff, everyone's in agreement for these two projects.
Okay. Yeah, I just saw it advertised, and just want to bring it up so we're all thinking about it. So
yeah.
Okay. The other thing I had on here, so the United Way is in process helping to purchase the Helena Inn. That's the old hotel that changed hands many times over by, it's not even Kmart anymore, the U-Haul place, which, kudos to the United Way for providing a good solution here. I guess what's in my mind is that it's kind of a obscure location. That's why it hasn't been very functional as a hotel. And we did the raised grant for the purposes of one of the selling points was for housing, and here's a housing. Has there been any discussion about providing transportation mechanisms for that property? And the reason I bring that up is,
Like what?
well, the people, our neighbors that are going to be living here, maybe won't have access to reliable transportation.
We have curb service with buses, so.
And actually, the curb to curb service, it's like the city's Uber. I've heard is how it functions. It actually is. I've actually heard very good things. Like my daughter's friend rides it to school. I just looking at it, it's a great solution. So I really wish United Way success on this, or actually Helena success on this. Where are they going to go get food? I just see a lot of them you know, unfortunately, you know, like in smaller towns in Montana, the town pump becomes the entity that supports the population. So I see them potentially walking across Cedar to Shelley's Cafe or the convenience store over there to get readily available food.
So the city has unlimited passes. They can be purchased, so whether it's monthly, yearly passes, so that they can ride as many times as they want for that time frame.
So I'm just, sorry, I'm just not quite following this discussion. Is it gonna be a homeless shelter?
Transitional housing.
So like, is that for, does that mean like a halfway house from like prison, or is it just for people who are unhoused?
What capacity, how many units?
And what's the, I just don't know what transitional housing
There's
is.
gotta be 75
I-
rooms at least,
What's that?
75 rooms in there.
Most hotels are typically about 100 units, you know, a 4-story hotel like that. That's a pretty smaller one, but so
That's kind of what
yeah.
I don't think they've quite ironed out all those details yet.
So, I mean, obviously it's not, this isn't a done deal yet.
No,
They're trying.
yeah, I mean, it's not going to be a homeless shelter. You know, so these, they've made it clear that it's gonna be more of a transitional housing.
So it's housing
Mhm.
for people who are, need some assistance in having housing. Well, yeah, I mean, that's probably something to just kind of be on the radar, I guess.
Yeah, and that's what I think it's a great kudos to the United Way for offering what is the best solution I think the community has seen. But looking at it from a transportation perspective, you know, this is kind of an isolated unit, and it's like it didn't work as a market, you know, in the private enterprise market as a hotel, you know, because of lack of access, you know, and maybe that makes it a good location for a, you know, transitional housing. But how do you get from this place to essential services, you know? And I, as a member of the community, I would like to prefer them be in with walking distance. You know, Winco is there, but it's kind of around the way, and it's a lot of way. It's a kind of a long way to cart groceries, and I don't know if these residents will be making their own food. It's just a lot of people go to prepared foods, and that's unfortunately that's gas stations.
Well, anywhere, if you're trying to get a job or something, you have to be able to get there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I don't know much about the bus. Maybe it's something we should learn more about.
$3 a ride, unless you qualify for one of the discounts. So,
So the city owns a big piece of property, kind of like behind that.
those are stormwater ponds.
Okay.
Yeah, I just see, personally, if I lived here, I would be walking across Cedar Street, not Oak Street.
Oh yeah. Go get cigarettes.
Yep, tobacco. And that's not a great location it's not a safe place.
And you're not
walk
gonna
across
cross
the street.
to across the street to the gas station
Yeah,
for $1 or any price. You just go across.
That's not much of a convenience store there, though.
But
Well,
people
they could expand now.
go to the vending machine and get one of those hot dogs off the rollers. They that wouldn't be my choice, but I'm an entitled person that can make other choices. I'm, um, so it's just something I think about. So I just put it on here and said it. We're going after grants to support housing. This is something maybe we should be thinking about. So. Moving on, sustainability. There seems to be a commission priority right now with looking at buildings and the water treatment and wastewater treatment plants. David, is the transportation department doing anything specifically for sustainability, like reducing vehicle miles traveled or anything like that?
We recycle our sand that we've been doing for years. We have one electric sweeper. We got our solar panels out there. We try to reduce the amount of miles traveled, but that kind of, depending on the winter, people want the roads cleared.
Yeah, and what I'm looking at is like not just operations, as a way, like complete street features, safe routes to school seems logically that's why you would implement a complete street feature, but putting in a complete street feature, maybe people will make the choice that they feel better walking or biking rather than doing an energy consumption, a higher energy consumption activity. So
I mean, there's some things in there. It's just right now we're in kind of maintenance mode because new streets and new reconstruction just costs too much right now to be sustainable. Not to use your play on words, but how much the city spent on Rodney is just not sustainable across the city.
yeah, but if we can reduce the vehicle miles traveled, our roads would last longer.
Yes, but as you know, passenger vehicles are not the ones that cause the problems with the roads. It's the semis, the garbage trucks.
And maybe this fits in more under the traffic calming, but there was a discussion several months ago about trying out temporary bulb outs, temporary road diets, temporary things that could be done at an exceedingly low cost. So I don't know where that fits in your agenda, but it seems to me, I have neighbors my age who will not bicycle because they don't feel safe. And I like bicycling in the neighborhood, but I think somehow one of my goals is to try to build the base to get more people out on bicycles, which wouldn't cost the city anything. And the more people who do it, the more cars are used to seeing people. So I would love to see this committee trying to build the base, right? I mean, this is pretty dark, pathetic. We aren't the only people who care about walking and bicycling in this town.
And I avid bike commuter because I do it by choice, but the last couple of years I've seen more. Some of them are e-bikes, but it's better than a car on the street. And that's why I've got this further in our agenda because some of it's just a placeholder. We have the traffic calming program. I would like to see, my vision for that is a safe street program or a healthy street program, which is much more encompassing. And I think that's probably better tied in with the LRTP discussion and MPO discussion about, you know, what are the priorities?
Well, I, if we're onto that topic, I feel like that's where maybe a committee like this could provide some value. Would be, hey, you think you need, you know, a traffic calming issue, bring that to the committee to look at that. And, you know, rather than the process that we have that seems to be like not really a feasible thing. You know, maybe there's a different process where, you know, MTAC could, you know, look at it, discuss. Someone thinks they have a traffic calming issue. I feel like we've done that in the past and had success in, you know, Saddle Drive, places where, you know, it, they were right, and, you know, we did look at it, and, you know, the city agreed that that was right, and that it, you know, something needed to be done.
Yeah, that's why I have a different vision on what, you know, the traffic calming program, because it hasn't been, there hasn't been any, has there been any projects out of the traffic calming program? Not that I'm aware of. So just,
Well,
you know,
most of the problems with the traffic calming program is part of it is there's skin in the game by the community or the block or whatever. You have to start off by going get everybody's signature saying that they want to participate. That's, I think, one. And then the ones that we have gone through the process, the data did not support the city's involvement, but the traffic calming program doesn't preclude people from, if they think that this feature needs to be there, but it doesn't meet the city's criteria, the city still will allow that feature to be put in. It's just put in through like a special improvement district at that corridor or that neighborhood page. So it's not that, you know, most of the ones that we have done in the past have shown there's the issue, the perceived issue isn't as great as than it really is.
yeah, and that's where I have a different approach to it, you know. And I think that's a better, I do think the traffic calming program needs to be restructured into something more useful. I think that's a much broader discussion. You know, moving back up to the agenda, HCC priorities on here, and you know, seeing the recommendations HCC gave to the commission is, you know, safe routes to school was a very high priority. Crosswalks were a very high priority, you know, and, you know, even higher priority than street maintenance, you know, and that's where, you know, I appreciate, you know, the mill and overlays on 11th and 6th. You know, it's much cheaper to maintain our infrastructure than to do our Rodney Street total reconstruction on it. But the way I use the city, I cross those streets way more often than I go on those streets. So the value for me is safer crossings. So, I mean, I'm, you know, my thoughts are very consistent, and I think our MTAC has been very consistent with HCC, their priorities that were provided to the commission. So. We're running out of time here. I'm gonna skip ahead. The neighborhood meetings and announcements. The neighborhood plan, I did check in with the city planner, Michael Alvarez, on that, and it's actually still in progress. So I'll just keep checking on that. There's the MDT safety studies, so you know, one on Montana. What was I thinking there? I know there's the one last chance, Montana last chance.
That's the one that from the Y over across.
Yeah.
Across last chance.
Yeah, so I've given my comments on that. The sidewalk summit, last time we talked, the last one we did, there's potentially going to try and do one before the budget. Is that probably not?
No, I think in reality, the next sidewalk song would probably be late summer or fall. To try to discuss funding those sidewalk.
Okay, and then we did talk about the transportation budget will be a May admin meeting. It's not the one 29th.
That's the 2 to 6 one.
Okay. And then there is the Lewis and Clark County is doing their growth policy update. So they're in their visioning phase right now. So they're gathering input, but they don't have a document or anything prepared yet.
So we're also the county and the city are doing a joint one, basically looking at the urban standards boundary and how the city and county interface with water, sewer, and transportation.
Okay. Do you know if they're
selecting a consultant at this point?
That's what I was going to ask, because it's part of the legislature to do this infrastructure plan.
So it's part of that, but they're just in the selection process. Probably see something maybe mid to late summer on the first round of this meeting or vision stuff.
Okay. Public comment on anything not on this agenda.
Yeah, quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
We rode the Going to the Sun rode on our bikes on May 4th. And it was just the lower part, just 6 miles out. And if you close it, they will come. I'm guessing there were 2,000 people there. And so what I would like to do this summer, and I'm asking if either of you would like to join me, I would like to do something having to do with bicycle advocacy, family, having an event. I tried my darndest and did not succeed in getting a bicycle safety thing, except I did a little indoor thing with kindergarten and first grade. So anyway, the Exploration Works is doing something on June 15th, and I'm going to see what that is. It might be in Centennial Park, which is great, but I think, and I guess, so anyway, if either of you are interested in joining me on this, I don't know very many people, but you all do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we need to build the base. We need to build an advocacy. We know they're out there, but we need to, this should not be a decision made by 7 committee members, right? There should be some way of reaching out and getting more input. So anyway, I'm interested in that. And I would like a priority of this committee to be to work with the city to see that the street closure fee is reasonable. Because I think block parties and family bicycle trains, bicycle parades, these are things that vibrant communities do. And right now, what's the street closure fee? It's prohibitive. It's hundreds of dollars, right?
No, it's not.
To have a block party?
A block party, if it's 1,000 people or less, it's $100.
Okay.
So then if it's over 1,000, it's 250.
If it's less than what was it? If it's less than 1,000, see, $100 is not something that people are going to do lightly. So anyway, I would like to see it be very reasonable, right? I mean, $100, my neighborhood could do this, but there are a lot of parts of town they couldn't. So anyway, I'm glad to hear that, because my neighbors quoted me a much higher figure when they asked the city to close the street.
No, and I,
So are you
Park-
talking closing it for an event? Or are you talking about closing the right of way to closing the street? Because those are two different things.
I'm talking about putting a car on Hoback at 9th and a car at the alley on Hoback to block other cars so my neighbors can come out and have a party. a potluck.
so it'd be
So
like a block.
That's
party.
a block party,
Yeah, and that's $100.
but you wouldn't be able to park cars on the street because that's not allowed.
So how do you keep how do you keep it safe?
Then you go and you get the barricades from the street department. And you put down your deposit and you bring them back, you bring them all back, then you return the deposit.
What's the deposit?
I think it's $500.
Yeah, so this is not a $500 deposit. How many neighbors can do that? I live in a wealthy part of town.
Well, the point is we have to, the city can't just absorb it, people just don't bother to bring back their.
Right, but what's wrong with parking the car there? I mean, seriously, this is what I did in Boise.
It's a liability.
Of
I think the city would have some issues with just parking cars.
well, anyway, I think we need to have this discussion, because I mean, how many blocks can come up with a $500 deposit for the barricades?
I mean, it's a $500 check.
Okay.
You don't cash it.
Yeah. Anyway,
Don't smash the barricade.
I think that it needs the
Trying
streets
to imply
need to
something
be.
there.
The streets need to belong to people who aren't in cars more, and I'd like this committee I'm urging you to figure out ways that we can make the streets more vibrant for
But
non-motorized folks.
Yeah.
the streets also belong to the people that have cars too. It's a multimodal system. It's not under the other. The two have to get along in totality. It can't be one way or the other way. And
I'm talking about like a 3-hour parade,
Right,
right?
we do block parties and parades all the time.
Really?
Yes.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because I say my neighbors.
There's one up on Pine Street that's been going on for I don't know how many years. There's one, the Reader's Village has been going on for a lot of years. There's neighborhood block parties that have been going on for over 10 years. They're just an annual thing.
Thank you.
Yeah, when we were in the COVID thing and cities blocked off streets to cars, for restaurants. And what people found is that people actually liked not having cars on the streets. And some of them become, I don't know if they're still temporary, but essentially they're permanent. And I thought about what street in Helena could benefit from that. Well, we kind of already have that with the walking mall. I'd love to see the parklets, at the Gold Bar and the brewery. I mean, they get people outside, they function very well. Streets are for people, so if we need to subdue cars, I think that's a better community. My other thought is that this has probably been 10 years ago, but we did a bike ride on Centennial Trail. From over by Walmart all the way up to the Wild Montana or Montana Wild, I can't remember which one it is, over by Spring Meadow Lake, and you had to, can't remember, we did shuttle vehicles somehow. I just remember my daughter was in the bike trailer at the time, but I think that's something that I would like to see done again, is, bike the Centennial Trail. And to see the progress that's been made, but also to see the gaps that are there as well too.
And June 15th, the Exploration Works is doing something, and what I would like to see, I know we're way off topic, is I'd like to see people be able to get to the Centennial Trail, not feel like they have to drive their cars to get to a protected trail. I mean, that is my goal, that people feel comfortable. And I agree with you totally, David. I drive a car. I drive a lot. And I just think if we could have a more equal utilization of the streets.
It's all about kind of the network of getting there,
Right.
each step.
Well, Centennial Trail was supposed to be the backbone
Yeah.
of the non-motorized network. And, you know, it's not complete. And then we have bits and pieces connecting to the other amenities, but
Can I,
there's a bunch of gaps.
we got time for one quick other thing here? Yes. I got an email from Safe Routes Partnership. May 21st this is an educational session on Zoom for the SS4A funding, Safe Streets for All funding. Application process is straightforward with a history of funding all eligible applicants in the past 2 years. And they're going to be talking about creative, innovative approaches for utilizing this funding source. I think it's an in-kind match sort of grant, but it can be used for planning and doing stuff, I think. So I just wanted to, I guess, bring that to your attention. Maybe.
So that's the one we got told no. And we don't have an action plan or no.
Okay.
So that's why the action plan is the number one thing out of the gate, short of the public participation plan. We put in for one, and MDT told us we were okay with what we had, and then I mean, it wasn't very many days after we put in the application that we got the no, you don't qualify. So I mean, maybe they have changed some of the well, we can look at that, but that's why we were pushing for that action plan. So we could put in for some of those grants. Now we can put in for the grant to do an action plan.
Yeah.
It pushes us off a cycle.
Yeah. Well, it seemed interesting to me of creative ways to use it, or creative ways. Seems like you can use it to study things.
Can we apply to use it for LRTP?
Right, and then
chapter
you
of
gotta
LRTP?
wait, that makes it out.
I don't have to look. Let's see. I mean, moving forward with the MPO, they haven't given us their exact amounts yet, but I can tell you what they preliminary told us is not going to be enough to sustain, you know, a staff person and a bunch of plans that we have to have moving forward. So we're going to have to be creative on grants, or the entities involved are going to have to pony up the money to get some of these other plans that are not necessarily needed but wanted. Okay.
So we're supposed to be done at 7.
7
Or 7:15.
15. Yeah.
Because I really would like to talk about the zoning. If we still have a minute to talk about
We got about 8 minutes.
it. Can I share my screen, perhaps? That should be my screen.
I don't have an HDMI. You can, if you connect to 326 or 309 presentation Wi-Fi.
Oh, so I can't just do it from Zoom.
You can try it.
You try it out. I just say share screen, post disabled. Well, that's fine. I could show you guys my screen probably.
Should we just come over and look
Three of
over your
us, yeah.
shoulder?
Okay, now try it. I made you co-host.
So this is the zoning commission. Oh no, this is the wrong thing. Okay. Here's the zoning commission agenda for today. So this is passed. This is the intersection we've been talking about. Euclid, we're going to improve these, or city's planning to improve the things here. they wanna build they've got a house here. This is a beef that I've had. There's no sidewalk here. There's great sidewalk here all the way to the elementary school, and then once you get across Euclid, there's great sidewalk. Yeah, over to the middle school. So they're asking to build a duplex here. There's already a house there, so they need a zoning variance to build this duplex. So you know, positive thing. It's going to fill in this gap in the sidewalk. So the only thing left will be the White Knight store there, which is kind of a blacktop. One, to me, a negative thing about it is that sidewalk is going to have 2 garage doors that you drive over the sidewalk here to get to these garage doors. And then, you know, they also have or are putting off-street parking over on this side of this existing house. I'm guessing that's going to get approved as a, you know, zoning variance, but you know, I mean, to me, this is in a lot of ways kind of a great thing, but also they shouldn't be required to have so much darn parking. And to me, you know, my starting place would be you shouldn't be allowed to cross the sidewalk to have parking. And you should have to show a good reason, you know, why, you know, maybe here it is kind of a good reason because there's no way you could have it off the alley. But, you know, our code essentially requires this. Whereas to me, I would suggest, you know, it shouldn't hardly be allowed. So I think there is room to, I guess, just kind of discuss that or kind of bring that perspective, because I know that, you know, the perspective that comes up when something like this comes up is a lot of people will say, well, there's not enough parking, you know, you have to look for a parking spot. And so, you know, there's a lot of kind of, you know, people saying there needs to be a bunch of off-street parking, and you know, we have some kind of goofy requirements about it where, you know, if you have a duplex, you need like 4 off-street parking spaces. If you have a triplex, you don't need that many. And it just, so I don't know if that's zoning.
What's the cross street there?
So this is Cleveland. This is where we're,
Right, Cleveland and what?
well, Wilder is this corner up here. And so then, you know, this is a brand new ADA ramp. And this one, all this is like nice sidewalk all the way down to the school. So I love to comment on this thing, you know, I mean, it's a good thing, but it kind of shows the problems with our code requiring all this off-street parking that's, you know, really not needed. And then, you know, that kind of goes to, I guess, you know, the question of new subdivisions and how they're going to be designed and stuff, because this is, you know, this is the design. And it's like, to me, I call it 1990s design, right? You have sidewalks, and then you drive across the sidewalk to your garage. You know, the old way of doing things was your garage was on the alley, and everyone drove into the alley and goes to their garage. And you don't have, you know, someone crossing the sidewalk every 30 feet, which kind of makes it, to me, you know, not as pleasant to walk, and not kind of as, and also, you know, it is a dangerous thing every time you're having someone back across the sidewalk, and it creates ice and it makes it, you know, not really passable. And so I think there's something to be, I guess to me, you know, that last kind of development that came in, to me, that space could have been so much better used. And, you know, in some ways that's their, you know, problem, that they, you know, they kind of wasted their space and what they designed there. But also I think it's partly because it's like, those are requirements that we have, or like, that meets all the codes, but to me, I would say, it shouldn't by default meet all the codes to, drive across the front of your house to your garage. That should be, the exception, not the rule. And there should be alleys, and, square, regular sized blocks with alleys, for, accessing garages and stuff. And that should be the rule, not really the exception. So that's just kind of my thoughts on it, I guess, but.
Those seem like policy things. Has the committee actually recommended these to the commission? Because I agree with you totally.
No, I think we've not really had this
Because I
discussion.
think that certainly doing away with parking minimums. Parking minimums do not, they promote driving, right? And they are, I would think the development committee would be on board because they can build more real stuff in the space.
Yeah, I think you got a public opinion is probably against us there. We're probably the oddballs for thinking that, but I do think that's also, a lot of cities, Minneapolis and, other kind of places that are on the forefront of this stuff have eliminated sort of parking minimums or anything. And I think it's been successful.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the industry, and of course I like to ride my bike. So I follow some of this stuff, and there should be no free parking in a city. In downtown Seattle, and it's remarkable what they can do. I mean, they've got public escalators to go up and down things, because they have the tax structure, to do it. And parking is just wasted space in an urban environment. What do we get out of it? We look at the big box stores here in Helena. Lowe's and Home Depot, and even Costco has way too much parking. They could deal with, 3/4 of their parking is all they need, maybe 2/3 of it. And the rest of it's just wasted space. And the transportation department can't do many things because we don't have the tax structure. If we had more buildings,
right,
we'd have a bigger budget. And these are, that's beyond the scope of the transportation department, but it is zoning, and
Well, that's a methodology too for the assessment.
Yeah, well, I mean, this,
Because right now a residential house pays $206. Commercial is 6 cents per square foot, so that's what our tax base comes from.
yeah. But if we had another building in the Home Depot parking lot,
yeah,
you could do twice as much.
I mean,
with that
this
property.
is solving so many problems. It's housing. It does increase your tax revenue. And
So that does have an alley. It's just some time ago they chose to split their lot in half.
yeah, well, and this is what they're proposing. This is the existing house. They want to build this, but they have to get a variance.
Yeah, and I think what they're doing here is actually very creative. They're getting, potentially 3 families on one lot here. If that's another house down there.
So this is three units on this one.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible, but the zoning requires one off-street parking, so they have to do this,
Right.
The zoning could say no off.
I'm not sure if it's zoning or building code really.
It's zoning.
But zoning
there's-
prohibits this.
Some of our streets don't allow for parking either.
I mean, this is against the zoning, but they're, I think they'll probably get the variance to allow it. But
Looks like, isn't it just a zone variance for like the setbacks, it looks like?
well, no, because this is there's an existing house here. You're allowed to build one more, but they want to build a duplex. So there'll be 3.
There's another reason why the zoning needs to get changed is
So that, that's kind of exactly the point. I mean, to me, this is agree. This is a smart thing they've done. And this is, we need more of this to kind of fill in Because that's the, you know, I mean, that's the question of maintenance versus your tax base. You know, if you can have 3 houses on this one corner, you know, you're paying the same amount for the street either way. And
Right.
so if you can fill in and get, you know, some more density inside the city. And so, you know, something like this shouldn't really need a variance. I mean, this should be something that we're encouraging.
No, I think the city of Helena, say 10, 15 years ago, was actually very progressive and eliminated some of the setback requirements. But I think the industry is even moving, you know, lot coverage, requiring a certain lot coverage. So it promotes things. You know, that would be within zonings to do something like this. You would have to, you know, have a 6% coverage, you know, on it. It's promoting people to use as much land as possible. You know, eliminating or very restricting, you know, parking requirements. You know, having parking maximums instead of parking minimums, or just make them artificially low. Billings has done this. Bozeman, you know, is actually having, you know, in commercial districts is the building frontage. You know, the downtown zoning district has it where there's a massing component, you know, along the front of the property, you know, to encourage people to, you know, put the building, you know, in a downtown environment where people want to be or want to walk, is to have the building in front. Bozeman actually requires the parking for multifamily units to be hidden, screened from the street. And generally what that does is you use the building as a screening. So if you look at what's happening in Bozeman, you know, you've got the frontage buildings and then the parking is all behind it. So
Is there at least one developer in town who's on board with this sort of thing? Because I think part of it is to get somebody who would actually build it, that it looks attractive, because the public will, you know, you show them visual preference studies and they like density, right? When they show them the picture, right? But you have to have something in town that they can look at, new development, that doesn't have you crossing the side. I agree. I mean, my grandchildren who live in towns where there's so many driveways, they don't walk as much as the ones here. And they don't ride their bikes as much. Because every single house you have to say, look, be careful, look, be careful, look, be careful, right?
Or they park right across the sidewalk. So, well, can we move to adjourn?
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's 7:22. We'll adjourn, but no, I appreciate bringing it up.